What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Inov-8 Bare Xf-210 version 3 and the F-Lite 245. Okay, so the review of the F-Lite 245s is way overdue. I've had these shoes since late last year. I had actually already picked them for my top 5 training shoes of 2020, and I still think that they're one of the better training shoes out there if you're looking for something more minimal and that's more flexible and you don't really care so much about like stability. The Bare XFs, I've had these ones for a few months now, not as long as the 245s, but I gotta be honest with you, the amount of times that I've been doing barefoot training or that I want to do barefoot training is a lot less nowadays than it's probably ever been in my life, just because I'm getting old and barefoot training hurts a little bit more if you're not doing it all the time, which, you know, I don't really do it all the time anymore just because I'm constantly going through different shoes. But here it is. We're going to be talking about both of these shoes today and whether or not you should go with either minimal, which would be the 245s, or barefoot, which would be the 210s. Both great options, just kind of depends on what you're looking for. So first off, we're going to be taking a look at the 245s, which in this design are a little bit heavier than the previous F-Lite models that this is based off of, like the 235, the 195, the 240. All the OG F-Lite models are what the 245s have been descended from, and this one has a new like knit upper. It's not like a sock. It doesn't really have a stretch to it or anything. I guess if anything, it's a very slight stretch, but it's a pretty taut kind of knit fabric. And like all of the previous F-Lite models, these are very flexible. They move with your feet extremely well. And that's one of the reasons I've always liked the F-Lite shoes, for being more minimal, not quite barefoot, but letting your foot move as intended. A lot of the design cues are still the same. You still have kind of like the Inov-8 stripes on the side. They're just some thicker fibers and they're kind of just woven into the side. That should give you some foot containment, but since this is a pretty flexible shoe, don't count on it holding your foot in place all that great. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. And the laces on this, not so good. They're kind of like the old flat laces that do come untied. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but otherwise, not too many things I dislike about the 245s in terms of build quality. Durability is yet to be seen, obviously. I've only really put these through so many workouts. I haven't really done any rope climbs, but it does have the same outsole that has pretty much always been on these shoes. You do have the dynamic fascia band, the rope tech guard if you want to do rope climbs, and then you have the Metaflex grooves all up in the front, so those expand and contract when your foot hits the ground. And then the dynamic fascia band is kind of like a midfoot shank without actually having a midfoot shank in there. And then this does use the Xterro Flow midsole. The drop on the shoe is 3 millimeters, and then the stack height is 9 millimeters in the back, 6 millimeters in the front. When I weighed the men's size 10, they came in at 250 grams, and all you need to know really is that they're very, very light shoes. I think they were 8 ounces when it came to like ounces, but I didn't have any precise measurements because of the scale that I used. So moving on to the Bare XFs. So these are the version 3s of the Bare XFs, and they have some upgrades to the upper, which are not that noticeable initially, to be honest with you. I don't have my original or my V2s with me, or I haven't had them in a long time, but I didn't really notice the upgrades for the version 3. But it does have a new upper fabric. This whole toe box area is a new kind of like mesh material. It's not the same kind of knit like on the 245s. It's more of just like a normal mesh material. And then on the sides of the shoe, you have these TPU overlays that are a fairly hard TPU and have ridges to them so that you can grab the rope or you get better traction on the rope. And then those also help in foot containment on the sides of the shoe. They do connect to the laces, so when you loop your laces through, it will pull on that and give you a more secure fit around the midfoot of the shoe. You have this fabric heel counter for more heel stability, but you know, since it is a barefoot shoe, you're not gonna get like a ton of heel stability from the actual construction of the shoe. There is a toe bumper on the front of the shoe to give you a little bit more added protection when you're doing burpees, but don't count on that to protect your foot if you're gonna drop weights on your foot. That's really not gonna do anything for you. And then since this is a barefoot shoe, it does have a 0 drop. The only cushioning that you're gonna get from this shoe is the insole that's provided, which is a 3mm power footbed. And then you have your outsole, which, like the previous models, is like a skeleton in like its design, which is pretty cool. I always really like that about it. It does have the back part raised up just a little bit for your heel. It does cup your heel a little bit on the sides, not a ton. It does raise up just a slight amount on the sides where you might make contact with the rope, but otherwise the outsole on the shoe is very, very minimal. And then when I weighed these like my 245s, I clocked them in at 7 ounces for men's size 10 and then 200 grams. Once again, not the most accurate measurements just because of the scale that I used, but either way you go, they are very, very light shoes. Okay, so if you're going by Inov-8's fit scale, then both of these shoes clock in at a 4 out of 5 width. So by Inov-8 standards, they're a little bit more on the wide side, but I think by normal shoe standards, they still are a little bit more towards like the normal, maybe even narrow side. If you have really wide feet, I don't think that either of these are going to be the greatest option for you. They do run more wide than the previous versions in these, so like they're definitely wider than the 235s were, and these are wider than the old original 210s. But when you compare them to like Nanos or Metcons, they're, you know, definitely not going to be as wide as those shoes. For me personally, I think they fit my feet just fine. I have pretty normal shaped feet, so I don't really have any issues with either of the way that these shoes fit. I actually really like the way that they fit. They fit my feet like a glove. If you're looking to go barefoot without socks in the Bare XFs, then I would recommend considering sizing half a size down because of the extra length that Inov-8 shoes tend to have. These ones are no exception to that. And if you have like normal, maybe even narrow feet, then that half size down might be beneficial when you go with the Bare XFs. But with the 245s, I guess you could go barefoot or sockless with these if you wanted to, but personally I think that just going with your normal true to size is going to be the way to go with the 245s. So the benefits of going with either a barefoot or more minimal training shoe is that you're going to get a much more flexible and lightweight shoe to work out in. And in both of these cases, you can't go wrong if that's what you're looking for. The Bare XFs are basically like a sock for your feet. It's really just an outer shell, and there's not a whole lot more than that. There's the rubber outsole to protect the undersides of your foot, but otherwise, this is as minimal as it gets. It really is just like a sock for your foot. If you're looking for the most amount of flexibility and the lightest shoe that you could possibly get, then the Bare XF is the way that you want to go. I will say though that if you're not used to barefoot training or running in barefoot shoes, then your feet are going to need some time to adapt because they can be a little bit harder on the feet. Even though you do have that 3mm insole, it's really nothing compared to your standard like running shoes or training shoes. Even the more minimal training shoes are like nothing compared to a barefoot shoe. But overall, I think if you wanted to strengthen your feet, barefoot training is the way to go. I think it does increase the overall stability of your foot just like normally. But for me personally, I have gotten to the point where I can't really train barefoot anymore. It hurts for too long and my feet are just not as conditioned for it as they used to be. At one point in my life, I used to be a complete barefoot shoe junkie and I would wear them for everything. At this point, it has to be the right workout for me to want to wear barefoot shoes. And if I'm going for a run, I'm probably not going to be running in the Bare XFs. Not that they're bad for a barefoot shoe, just it's not really my preference anymore. And that's not a fault to the shoe itself because the shoe itself is doing exactly what I needed it to do if I was looking for a barefoot shoe. It's a personal problem more than anything. But where I do think the 210s excel at are workouts that don't really have me doing that many jumps. I mean, box jumps in a workout are fine. Burpees in the Bear XFs are excellent, combined with, you know, some powerlifting movements. Maybe not a ton of barbell cycling, but I can definitely throw in some Olympic weightlifting movements in there. Responsiveness with these shoes is excellent, obviously, because there's really nothing between the ground and your foot, so you're pretty much pushing directly on whatever your training surface is. But since they are a barefoot shoe, lateral stability is not the greatest. Obviously, the ridges on the outsole are a little bit more round than you'll find on some of the standard training shoes on the market right now. So built-in lateral stability, not the greatest, but if you wanted to strengthen your own foot's lateral stability or your ankle's lateral stability, I think the 210s are the way to go. That being said, I would almost always choose the 245s over the 210s for my training all day, any day, because I think these have the right amount of cushioning while still being a more minimal shoe. Like I said, they only have a 9mm stack height and 6mm stack height in the front of the shoe, and that is still very, very close to the ground. They do have a 3mm footbed as well, but when you're comparing that to the rest of the training shoes on the market, these are one of the more minimal shoes still, and they're still very flexible and lightweight. I personally really like running in these shoes. I don't like a ton of cushioning with my running shoes. I like to be a little bit more on the stable side, and the 245s hit like perfectly. They're not the most cushioned shoes, so if that's what you're looking for, these are not going to be the ones for you. But for me, I think the Xterra Flow midsole is the perfect amount of cushioning without being too soft. And the same thing goes with like bounding movements. They have just the right amount of cushioning so that it doesn't take away from the feedback that I'm getting from the ground, but it's also not beating my feet up. If anything, like, I don't think that these are the greatest shoes for lifting overall, but in my opinion, I still think that they're better than the 210s for my own personal liking. If I was going for 1 rep maxes, then the 245s would probably not be my first pick, and in that case I would pick the 210s, like depending on the lift. I guess if you're going for like a deadlift 1 rep max, then I would probably take the 210s, maybe even a squat 1 rep max. But if I was Olympic weightlifting, I would probably take the 245s, just because I think that they have a little bit more lateral stability just from the way that the outsole is shaped. The foot containment on either of these shoes is not great both ways you go, so I don't think Olympic weightlifting in either of them is the greatest. But for most of the weights that you're doing in a normal CrossFit workout, I think both of these shoes are going to be just fine, but I would give the edge to the 245s. The Bear XFs retail for $120, where the 245s go for $135, and that pretty much falls right in line with all of the other top training shoes on the market. I feel like at that price point, these shoes are easily going to be overlooked for the Nike Metcons and the Reebok Nanos, but I think that Inov-8 might be trying to go for like the niche market, because obviously these are more niche training shoes than Metcons or Nanos are. Even compared to like the G300s and the 235s, I think that these are kind of in a weird spot. You have to kind of know what you're getting into when you're buying either of these shoes. For barefoot training, I think the 210s are going to be one of the best barefoot shoes out there right now for training purposes. If I was to go with a barefoot shoe, then it would be the Bear XF 210s. But like I said, for me personally, I don't feel like barefoot training quite fits my lifestyle anymore. It takes a little bit of time to reacclimate yourself to barefoot shoes, and it's something that I have to really want to use a barefoot shoe for, or the workout has to be something I really want to use this shoe for. And a lot of those for CrossFit workouts don't really pop up so much anymore. For me personally, my pick between either of these shoes is going to be the 245. Like I said, I picked these ones for my top training shoes of 2020 for a reason. These are really, really nice training shoes. They're lightweight, they're flexible, they're still plenty stable for pretty much all the weights that you're going to find in the typical CrossFit workout. Like I said, I wouldn't be trying to hit PRs in this shoe, but I think for the majority of people looking for a more lightweight, more minimal shoe trainer, the 245s are gonna be an excellent pick. Plus, I really like running in these shoes. Plyometrics and bounding movements are also really nice to do in the 245s. So whether you go barefoot or minimal, I don't think that there is a right or wrong way to train. It really just comes down to personal preference. And with either of these shoes, you're looking at some of the better ones in the barefoot or minimalist category. If you guys have any questions about the Bare Xf-210s or the F-Lite 245s, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.